That box of old toy cars sitting in the garage, the ones shoved in a shoebox and forgotten the second you got too old for them. One of the tiny die-cast cars inside might be worth more than your actual car. 10 toys just like it have sold for real money. One sold for over $16,000. Nobody who owned them knew it either, not until someone finally checked the paint. Here's the part nobody tells you about old Hot Wheels. It's not the car model that decides the price. Every kid who got a Mustang or a Camaro off the shelf got roughly the same toy, expensive one or not. So the model alone tells you nothing. It's not how shiny it looks either, even though a clean paint job feels like it should mean something. It's not even having the box, though that helps more than people expect. Here's what really decides it, a handful of small details locked in the day these cars left the factory that most people never once stop to check. A paint type, a colour nobody expected, a tiny mistake on the packaging itself. None of these details are hidden. They're sitting right there on the toy, in plain sight, the entire time. That's the entire difference between a dusty toy bin and a small fortune. And most of these details sat in plain sight in driveways and toy chests for over 50 years without anyone bothering to look closely. Garage sales, thrift stores, and dollar bins have handed these exact toys away for pocket change more times than anyone can count. Entire collections have gone into landfills because someone cleaning out a garage never once flipped a single car over. We're going to check 10 of them from that era before we're done here. Let's find out what's sitting in your garage. Number 10. A small blue toy car with a black roof gets tossed in a bin of loose Hot Wheels without a second look, because blue is about as common a colour as this hobby has. That instinct isn't wrong on its own. Most blue Hot Wheels from this era genuinely aren't worth much. The 1971 Boss Hoss breaks from that pile for one clear reason. This exact casting was only made in Hong Kong, and a small number left the factory with a black painted roof instead of the usual solid colour straight through. A sealed example sold for $2,386.86. An ordinary Aqua Boss Hoss with no black roof brings closer to $200. Turn it over, check the paint. It's the roof colour, not the body colour, that separates an ordinary toy from a real find. And it's easy to miss since the roof is such a small part of the whole car. That's a jump of more than 10 times for one painted section barely the size of a fingernail. A dealer at a swap meet in the early 2000s used to sort these by body colour alone and never once flipped one over to check the roof. Number 9. A small gold bubble-topped car gets picked up, admired for its strange shape, and set right back in the bin, because most people assume the shape alone is the interesting part. The shape isn't what makes this one worth checking. This is the Beatnik Bandit, one of the original 16 castings this entire toy line launched with in 1968. Designed with a bubble-shaped clear canopy that made it stand out from every ordinary car-shaped toy on the shelf beside it. A gold example, still factory sealed on its original card, sold for $2,938. The exact same car loose, out of its packaging, in that same gold colour brings closer to $100. Turn it over, check the paint. Gold under the clear bubble canopy is the colour to look for, but the packaging itself is doing almost all the work on the price here. A loose example, however nice, is a completely different number than a sealed one. Plenty of these got pulled straight out of their packaging by kids the same afternoon they came home, which is exactly why a sealed one is so much harder to find 50 years later. Number 8. A small blue Volkswagen Beetle gets treated as background clutter in a toy bin, since this exact shade of blue is one of the single most common colours this line ever produced. Most examples of this car genuinely are worth very little. This specific one sold for $5,000 anyway, and the colour has almost nothing to do with why. It was packaged for the English export market, sealed on a blister card printed just for overseas retail rather than the standard domestic card. That sealed export card sold for $5,000. A loose example in the identical blue brings well under $100. Turn it over, check the paint, and check the card if you still have it. Painted headlights and blue-tinted windshield glass confirm a genuine Hong Kong example, but it's an intact, unopened export card that turns an ordinary colour into real money. Cards like this got thrown out constantly the moment the toy came out of the packaging, since nobody in the 70s had any reason to think a scrap of printed cardboard mattered more than the car itself. Number 7. A squat little pickup truck with an open bed gets treated as one of the plainer toys in the collection, since pickup trucks rarely get the attention the sports cars do. That's a fair assumption most of the time. The 1968 custom Fleetside breaks from it because of one detail almost nobody checks. Most examples have a bare, unpainted metal base plate underneath. A small number left the factory with that base plate fully painted instead. One of those, in orange, sold for $9,988.88. An ordinary blue Fleetside with the standard bare base brings well under $100. Sometimes barely a fraction of the painted example's price. Turn it over. Check the base. A painted base plate paired with true orange body colour is the exact combination worth checking your own toy box for tonight. Most of these spent decades face up in a toy chest, wheels spinning against carpet. Nobody ever once curious enough to flip the truck over and look underneath. Number 6. A pale blue muscle car with an oddly wide hood scoop gets dismissed as one more colour variation nobody cares about, because plum and purple are the colours collectors usually chase on this particular casting. Blue looks like the boring option by comparison. That assumption is backwards. The 1974 Roger Dodger was mostly made in plum and purple, and blue was the far shorter, far rarer run. A blue example sold for $8,178, and a second blue example sold years earlier for almost the exact same price, which is what confirms this isn't a fluke. A common plum Roger Dodger brings $20 to $50. Turn it over, check the paint. Solid opaque blue instead of translucent plum or purple is unmistakable the moment you hold it up to the light. One collector spent years assuming his blue example was a cheap knockoff simply because it didn't match the plum-coloured picture in his price guide. Number 5. A brown Camaro gets shelved next to the red and blue versions without much thought, since brown is a strange, unglamorous colour choice compared to the flashier one sitting right beside it. That's exactly why it gets overlooked. This was one of the 16 original launch castings from 1968, and chocolate brown was one of its lowest volume retail colours. A loose example in excellent condition sold for $8,500. A common red or blue custom Camaro in the same condition brings somewhere between $100 and $300. Turn it over, check the paint. A deep, transparent brown, not a flat, opaque one, paired with the base marking underneath, is the entire test here, and it takes about 5 seconds to check. Boxes of these got sorted by colour at swap meets for decades, brown always shoved to the back as the least desirable pile. Number 4. A red Mustang sitting in its original sealed packaging gets treated as just another carded toy nobody bothered to open, since red is the single most ordinary colour this specific Mustang casting was ever made in. The colour was never the point here. This is a survival story, not a rarity story. Almost nobody kept these factory sealed with the small round collector's button still attached to the card, since that button was designed to be cut off and traded, not preserved. A sealed example with that button intact sold for $9,995. The same red Mustang loose, no card, no button, brings a few $100s at most. Turn it over, and this time don't turn it over at all. Leave it sealed. Opening a genuinely rare carded example is the single most expensive mistake anyone on this list could make. More than one collector has admitted to opening a sealed car as a kid just to play with it, having no idea what that single decision cost them decades later. Number 3. A white Mustang stock car with painted-on racing flames gets mistaken for a cheaper, later reissue because most collectors expect this specific model to show up in yellow, not white. That expectation is exactly backwards on this specific casting. Yellow was the standard colour on this 1975 casting. White was made in enamel paint instead of the usual glossy see-through coating. A completely different, far less common painting process on this exact toy. A sealed white example sold for $12,988.90. A common yellow example brings $250 to $500. Turn it over. Check the paint. Hold it to a light source. If the colour is flat and opaque instead of glassy and see-through, you're looking at the rare version, not the common one. Plenty of these sat in the same shoebox as their far more common yellow siblings for 50 years, nobody ever separating them out as anything different. Number 2. A copper-coloured muscle car sealed on its original card gets picked up, glanced at and set back down because the car is facing the same direction as every other one on the shelf, or at least it looks that way at a glance. Look again before setting it back down. A small factory error sent a batch of these out with the car facing the wrong direction inside the blister window, left instead of right. An error that should have been caught on an assembly line, built to catch exactly this kind of mistake. A sealed example with that reversed car sold for $15,000. The identical car facing the correct direction still sealed brings a small fraction of that. Turn it over. No, don't. Just look straight at the card. Which way the car points inside its own packaging is the entire difference between an ordinary sealed toy and a $15,000 mistake nobody caught in 1968. Whoever ran quality control that day let an unknown number of these slip through, and nobody has ever figured out exactly how many. Number 1. And this is the one piece on the entire list where the colour itself, not a packaging quirk, not a painting process, not a factory mistake, is the whole story. A purple muscle car with an engine visible under its hood gets passed over constantly because purple looks like an unusual, almost unwanted colour choice compared to the greens and blues this exact model came in more often. Unusual is exactly the point. This 1971 Oldsmobile casting was pulled from later catalogues entirely after a dispute over using the Oldsmobile name, an unusually short production run compared to almost everything else this toy line ever made, which capped how many were ever produced in any colour at all. Purple was the shortest, least common run of the bunch. A sealed purple example sold for $16,100. The highest confirmed price on this entire list. A common green or light blue example brings $100 to $300 today. Turn it over. Check the paint one final time. Transparent purple over a chrome base, sealed if you're lucky enough to still have the card, is the single most valuable combination this whole video has covered. Somewhere out there, one of these is still sitting in a box in an attic, and whoever owns it has no idea it's the single most valuable toy on this entire list. 10 toys. Every single price on this list traced back to the same handful of things most people never once stopped to check before the box got shoved onto a shelf and forgotten. Not the car model everybody already recognizes. Not how many of these got made overall. And not how nice the paint looks from 3 feet away, a paint type instead of a paint colour, a packaging detail nobody thought mattered, a factory mistake that slipped past everyone in 1968 and never got caught until decades later. If you've got a box of old Hot Wheels somewhere, even just a handful loose in a drawer, it's worth 5 minutes to go look them over instead of guessing what they're worth. You don't need to know every casting name or every colour variant to start. You just need to know where to look, what to leave alone if it's still sealed, and what to flip over the second you're not sure. If something in that box matches one of these 10, Get a second opinion from someone who grades and authenticates these for a living before you do anything else with it, because a guess isn't worth nearly as much as an answer. People have sold boxes like this at garage sales for $1 a car without a second thought, and other people walked away with a small fortune because of it. Neither side usually finds out which one they were until years later, if they ever find out at all. That's 10 toys. 10 completely different reasons, and every one of them came down to a detail that was sitting there in a shoebox the entire time, waiting for someone to finally check.